at 10:05. We will start with our moment of reflection and pledge of allegiance, led by Trustee Ursula. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, roll call vote. Rosie?
Trustee Anderson?
Here.
Trustee Crane?
Here.
Trustee Wygant? Trustee Pearson?
Here.
Trustee Murphy? Trustee Ursulou? Here. Trustee Barto? Dr. Smith?
Here.
And we have 3 trustees that are on their way, but we have a quorum, so we're starting. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, moved by Trustee Crane, seconded by Trustee Ursula. Roll call vote.
Trustee Anderson?
Yes?
Trustee Crane?
Yes.
Trustee Wygant? Trustee Pearson?
Yes.
Trustee Murphy? Trustee Ursulou?
Yes.
Trustee Barto?
Community input on special agenda items only. This is an opportunity for the public to address the board regarding items on the special meeting agenda only. Comments on special meeting agenda items are limited to 3 minutes per comment, up to 20 minutes per topic. A speaker may not relinquish his or her time to another person.
Rosie, do you want to turn off the scene so they can see the countdown?
And they can just speak in place that the mic's not here.
Great. Okay. We will start with Kristen Carlin.
Should I go over here?
Sure.
Okay.
Good morning. I'm excited for the opportunity to share on this topic and most importantly to redeem myself after last month's feedback. So in terms of budget, as PTA president at Killiebrook and a former teacher, I feel like there are some budgeting items that the community would assume are provided to our students when in fact they're mainly a PTA priority or a community outreach. And I would love to work together or see the district make some moves to make these guarantees for all students, whether they're at College Park, Pomona, Newport Coast, or wherever. So a few of these issues that to my knowledge receive zero funding in terms of a guarantee for all students, meaning it happens during the school day, would be visual arts. So in terms of music, our students get 30 minutes of music a week on average, is my understanding. There might be I might be off a little bit in terms of minutes. But no visual arts. So currently we're providing Meet the Masters. It's very labor intensive and it's also based on the resources that we have as a PTA, which falls on the shoulders of very few. Honestly, a lot of our parents assume that PTA is a paid position. Like they're surprised that I don't actually work there. Maybe that's because they're used to seeing me there when I did work there. Next up would be field trips. The district provided a very eloquently worded newsletter that I loved reading on the importance of these enrichment opportunities. I agree full-heartedly. Again, something I wish the burden didn't fall on the parents of that school. I did some research. Our 6th graders are about to go to the Lion Air Museum. That's funded by the Lion Air Museum. Other opportunities, the PTA either funds the bus or funds the field trip in its entirety. 6th grade science camp I know is a hot topic. I don't think I need to talk too much more on that. And then the last 2 issues are big ones for me. The one is health and nutrition. My understanding is kindergarten through 6th grade, our students do not receive any education. We used to. The school nurses would come in and that system worked great. As a teacher, I participated in that and that's amazing. Our female population, I think the vast majority begin puberty during their time at an elementary school site. That's something that affects all of us. But having a 6th grader, that's a very important issue. I have a lot of my kids' friends at my house. That's a huge one for me. And then last up is our GATE program. So every 3rd grader in Newport-Mesa has the opportunity, I think it's an opt-out, so basically it's assumed that most of our 3rd graders take the GATE test. To my knowledge, there's no guaranteed assistance or support or program in place for our students who qualify for GATE, or you could loop in the students that perform at the advanced level. The most common answer that I get to these concerns is that this is up to the site, that these are discretionary funds. If you take a school site like Killiebrook, which I think is kind of middle of the road for our district in terms of neediness, 7 seconds. These are things that shouldn't be up to the principal who's there at that time. As you know, a principalship is not usually, it's not considered a guaranteed long-term position. So thank you for your time.
Okay, next we'll have Holland Nielsen.
Hi, my name is Holland Nielsen. Thank you for the opportunity, and we appreciate everything that everyone in this room is doing for our kids at Killiebrook and the schools in Newport-Mesa Unified. I'd like to echo some of the things that Ms. Carlin had just mentioned. I have 3 kids at our school. I've been on the PTA for 5 years, and it is a full-time job that I love and loathe. Some of our students' population, I think there are some needs that could be met, and I think that we have the resources and the talent group to fix some of these. I know that she just spoke about our GATE program. In my opinion, some of our kids that we're talking about constantly are falling behind, and I think some of our students are falling forward with no map. And there are kids that, whether or not they're testing into GATE, they're high-achieving kids in our school system that I think deserve the opportunity to see some things ahead as opposed to being tutors in their own classrooms. And then in terms of art, the data is in. We all know that art is going to support all these other wonderful developing things going on in our kids and our communities. So I'd just like to see a bit more attention given there. I think that some of the kids are in the weeds with the heavy academics. The art can sometimes provide the opportunity to see things differently and improve their academics. And thirdly, the health program agreed. I think that having our kids have access to open conversations with adults that have a basic framework of information to share with our students allows for them to maybe avoid some of these bigger mental health issues that we're seeing in elementary school. I know that we're seeing things with our children that is, some of it's like new, it's like post-pandemic feelings of bottled up emotions and not knowing who to talk to, how to talk to, with these giant changes in their bodies, which my kids have not yet hit and I'm not looking forward to, so I would like some partnership on that as well. Again, I appreciate everything that everyone does in this room, and we are so fortunate to have the great school that we do. So, thank you. I always feel like I'm gonna cry.
Thank you very much. We will now move to closed session at 10:12, and we will come back out here in an hour or so. We're not, no definite time. So unfortunately for the public that is here. So we will recess into closed session now, and then we'll come back out later for our public study session. Thank you. To resume our meeting at 12:36. Mr. Trader?
Thank you for being here.
Well, I wanted to start this slide and just kind of set the table for the trustees, anyone in the audience, that really 2 goals today for all of us to better understand how our budget is different from other places, what's unique to a community funded district, where are we right now, and where do we think we're headed. So just a general understanding of our budget, and then some time for the board to discuss board priorities with some of those discretionary funds. So those are the 2 goals for this session.
So buckle up. Let's get ready to blast off into the galaxy of numbers. If we get lost in space, we'll radio Dr. Smith for directions. But let's talk about kind of where we're at. I love this slide. This is my favorite slide. We could probably spend the whole time on this one and not go anywhere else. It's my favorite because I think from a policy perspective, it's like the, you know, when I go to the large and spacious building across the freeway, the mall, yeah.
Yes.
I always have these like directional signs, and it shows me where I've come from and where I am, and then where I'm going. And this is one of these slides that I think shows us a lot about, from a policy perspective, of why we do things that we do. So when you look at this, since prior to the year 2000, we were really, really strapped I mean, we did not have, I remember being in Mike Fine's office in June of 1998, and we didn't have, at 1 in the morning, on a Sunday morning, we didn't have enough to cover a 3% state required reserve. And so things have changed. Things have gotten a whole lot better. But when you look at the data, when you look at this data here, you'll notice that we've had exceptional growth, about on average, 6-7% a year. That's amazing. However, when you look at periods when we do have an economic situation, look at how long that can last. We can go for 4 to 5 years of average a year-over-year increase of about 1%. Now that's serious, because we need about 4% to maintain, just to keep the lights on, keep things going. We need about 4%. So if we hit a stretch of 4 to 5 years of just 1%, then that's an issue. And for example, we had from 1994 to 1998, we only had about 9.99% per year increase. From 2010 to 2013, we had about 1.31% increase every year. So, and we can vary. Our year-to-year swings can vary about 4%. Now that means, that equates to about 5% on the salary schedule and $12.9 million in dollars. And so when you think about that, what is the price of stability? What does this tell us about stability? If we don't want to have furlough days, which we didn't during the Great Recession, we were one of the very few school districts that did not do that. Layoffs, cuts of program. What is the price of stability? And so when you think about that here, so if you do just off the napkin math, right? A worst case scenario, 5 years of 1% growth each year, right? That's going to be that's going to give us roughly a $9.7 million deficit per year. So 5 times 9.7, that's $48.5 million. That's why you have the reserves that you do. So let's take a look here. Community funded versus local control funding formula. There's a difference in how we're funded. We're funded by property tax, right? So when you look at the local control funding formula, average daily attendance is what changes revenue. For us, property tax changes revenue. For LCFF districts, demographics drive funding. For us, demographics don't necessarily drive funding. Yes, we need to make sure that we're collecting data so we know who our free and reduced students are, who our EL students are, because some of that can drive categorical funding. But overall, for the base formula, doesn't drive our funding. And then local control funding formula, funding is the floor. And for us, for community funded, we're above the floor. So, and we'll illustrate that here. So you have community funded districts, a low property tax district. Here on the left, you see the blue section is the property tax. The red section is the state fills that. They call that state aid. They get you up to what the state believes should be your funding. The middle chart, the middle graph there, where that's a high property tax district. You see the blue area is higher. That's property taxes. With the red area smaller, that's state aid. We're on the side there, and you can see there that we are $147 million into community funded status. And what would that tell you? In a time of economic upheaval, that could mean that we could drop $147 million before our funding would stabilize. So let's look at economic recessions in the past and how the state has dealt with this. We had a savings and loan crisis. The state didn't do anything, but when we got to the dot-com bust, the state redefined community funded, the meaning of community funded. We used to get about $2.6 million. It was $120 per ADA, and that's in the Constitution. That's in the state constitution. And then the state said, you know, we're going to reinterpret what that really means. Because we give you funding already for certain things, and we're going to include that. We're going to count that towards your $120 per ADA. So we lost out about $2.6 million per year in that redefinition of what basic aid meant for community funded status. And then you get to the subprime mortgage crash, and the state said they borrowed $10 billion from us, which caused Newport-Mesa some cash flow issues. We really had to sharpen our pencil there. And as you're aware, when you run out of cash, you're done. So you never ever run out of cash, ever. And then they also reduced our categorical funding, and that costed us about $4 million in a permanent cut per year. And then when the state ran into trouble with COVID, they proposed a 10% cut to our minimum state aid. And so you can see the state's going to be creative. You can see what they did with the arts and music funding grant, the grant, the one-time money. The state already allocated that money this year. They rolled out half of it already. And now they're coming out saying, no, you know what, we think we're going to claw that back. So the state can get very creative when they get in a bind. And we know they're in a bind. Next year, they're looking at a $22.5 billion deficit. It's actually a little higher than that, but that's what they're saying at this time. So the state will be creative, and they'll make changes. So key reflections here. We know that we need to be prudent about how we're financing things, because we can have a severe drop in revenue. We know that when the state gets into fiscal trouble, they'll find a way. And unlike our neighbors get funding for supplemental LCF funding for universal transitional kindergarten. There are things there that we don't get funded for. And those things are adding up. They're over $30 million right now. So you're carrying $30 million program the state does not fund us for. So let's talk about our reporting cycle. This is the reporting cycle. It's something that you'll see every year. And here we are at the budget study session here in February, between January and March. And then let's look at our Board of Education oversight and commitments. So we'll bring to you unaudited actuals, budget and workers' compensation certifications for you to certify. And then on the commitment side, these are board-specific commitments. So let's first talk about the Irvine Company. Back in June of 1990, the board entered into a facilities mitigation agreement with the Irvine Company, and they made a $5 million funding of an endowment at that time. In 1999, the Irvine Company added $1 million to that principal for the inclusion of Bonita Canyon into the district. And the endowment was hard because when interest rates dropped, we couldn't spend it because the board had set a parameter that the endowment, we could only spend over and above what, what it earned in comparison to the cost of living. So that we could only spend that which was over and above the cost of living. And when interest rates are really low, we weren't making any money on that. In fact, the earnings that we were earning on that endowment were less than the cost of living. So we couldn't spend it, and we couldn't spend it for over a decade. And so the board reconsidered that policy in April of 22, the board established an allocation method allowing for up to 7% of accumulated earnings on a fiscal basis to be spent out of there. And then on August 16th of 2022, the board gave guidance to the district regarding these funds, and as a result, we approved an audio-visual study for the NPRs, and that was allocated $45,000 for that. So it doesn't look like we're going to spend all of that money, and that's going to roll over into account. So you'll see that roll over in account, and we'll bring those recommendations to you with your June adopted budget. Let's talk about Measure F. During the campaign in 2005 for Measure F, the board indicated that, look, if this passes, we will not burden the taxpayers with anything more than what they're burdened with Measure A. And at that time, it was estimated to be $22 per $100,000 of assessed value. But because the assessed values did remarkably well, that number then was adjusted to $18.87 per 100,000 of assessed value. So that's the limit that we're at. And even though we have $88 million of authorized Measure F bonds that we could issue, we're stuck until we can get significantly below the $18.87 per $100,000 of assessed value. And that looks like that will happen in the year 2038. So just want to make sure you're aware of that commitment that the board has made. And then routine restricted maintenance, along with Measure A, the board passed a resolution 3403.00 on February 29, 2000, which established a routine restricted maintenance account. And that was funded, graduated up to 4%. And so that currently, that fund is funded at 4% or more. That's a commitment the board has made, and that's what we follow. And then other post-employment benefits, reserve for economic uncertainty. The board has set a minimum there of 4.5%, so we reserve for economic uncertainties 4.5%. The state requirement is 3%, but you're at 4.5% due to a board commitment. And then other post-employment benefits, we did a study back in 2018 that discussed these are employee benefits for retirees ages 55 through 65 that retire from the district. And this is we do this to attract talent, and so there's a liability associated with this. So if we're making a promise, we're obligated to provide health and welfare benefits to retirees ages 55 to 65. There's a cost to that. And GASB requires us to mark that cost and track it and put it on our balance sheet so it shows up as a liability. The study found that by funding the liability, we can actually lower our health and welfare costs. Wall Street looks at this when they do our credit rating. So whenever you go to the market for debt and whatnot, this is why the district has such a high credit rating, is that you've begun to fund some of these things. And so March of 2021, the board adopted a resolution 2003-21, which established a Section 115 trust, which you are you're funding at 0.5% of salary every year. And the first contribution was made in December of 2022. And this has a lot of advantages. Not only does it look good to Wall Street, it lowers our cost for health and welfare, but also you earn a greater interest rate because the money that is being invested is now tied to a timeline, an investment horizon that matches for how long you're going to keep the money. Because when you keep money with the treasurer's office, that has a very short investment horizon. very short. And so as a result, the rate's very, very low that you make. So anyways, that would be a mismatch if we were to put money in the treasury that we're keeping forever, essentially. That would be a terrible mismatch, almost just awful. So Dr. Smith has asked us to look at financial triggers that will help us to stay ahead of the game so that we'll be able to see things before they happen, so we can be proactive. And so there are some, I'll just cover just a few of them with you. So routine restricted maintenance, of course, this is a commitment that you made to have at least 4%. And so favorable on the green side if it's greater than 6, acceptable between 6 and 4. If it's less than 4, then we need to evaluate. Last year, you were at 4.83%. Other post-employment benefits, 0.5%, right? Last year, you're at 0.5%. Financial triggers for economic uncertainty, you're at 4.5. Last year, at 4.5. Our general fund balance change. If it's greater than $3 million, that's wonderful. That's great. This is on the unrestricted side. If it's between 3 and 0, that's acceptable. If it's less than 0, then we need to evaluate. That means we're deficit spending. Last year, we were up 1.2 million. Cash flow reserve. Cash flow is really important to the district. And because if you have to go to the money changers to borrow this money, it's costly. It's really costly. In fact, it's so costly, it could fund about 10 teachers. When you count the loss of the interest that the money makes, that you have there for the cash flow, and the cost of doing all the attorneys and the bond folks, that kind of thing, it's terribly expensive. We don't want to have to do that. We can avoid it. So favorable, 13%. If it's greater than 13%, acceptable between 13 and 7%. Evaluate if it's less than 7. Last year, or this year, we are at 9.6%. Property tax revenue change. If it's greater than 5, that's wonderful. We need about 4% to manage things. If it's between 5 and 4, acceptable. If it's less than 4, then we need to evaluate. Last year was, this year it's at 9.37. Here's where we got an issue. This is something that people tell us you never ever want to do. Ever, don't ever do this. And we're doing it. And the challenge is because we've been given us all this one-time money. The one-time money has to be spent, right? It's not going to be effective if we don't spend it on people. So we're put in a position where it's going to create a problem because we're spending one-time money on ongoing expenditures. And so we're going to evaluate, and this is what this means. We got a burn rate of one-time money of about $15 million a year. We think we have about $8 million of that covered, but in June of 2028, when the one-time money stops, we're looking at a $7 million deficit. And so we're managing that. And you're going to see some of that as we try to manage that and not increase that gap, but actually decrease that gap. So you look at your priorities.
Jeff, you may want to.
We have one of our trustees needs to leave, and so I just wanted to offer the opportunity to ask any questions that I can go into 1:15. Oh, sorry.
So here's our board priorities and a reflection of what we're doing. Some broad areas on how we're moving your priorities forward. And then there's some significant categorical programs that are hitting us. Art and music, Prop 28. This is supplemental. It's for arts education instruction, and it's $2.5 million. It's very sizable, and so it's a great thing. You'll be looking at this coming next year. Universal Transitional Kindergarten. Although we don't receive any funding for this, we're expanding on this, and that's going to cause some facility issues, which we'll be talking to you about. We're maxing out on facilities, so not only do we have programs, but we have facilities. And then expanded learning opportunities. That's about a $7.2 million program. We're ramping up there. That's a huge program for us. So a lot of categorical funded programs coming from the state. So let's look forward to 23-24. So I think Dr. Jocham may want to add some preschool special ed assessment color here.
Sure, thank you. As you may know, preschool is an area of growth within the district, especially in special education. And we have an ongoing obligation to identify, assess, and place students prior to their 3rd birthday in conjunction with either a parent referral or through our relationship with the Orange County Regional Center. And our teams are not going to be able to keep up with the demand that's coming for those students. And so this area of opportunity is really to enhance those teams, augment those teams to do those special education preschool assessments to keep us in compliance with the legal timelines, and to do a quality assessment both in the natural environment. We observe students in their natural setting, and then have those teams do a thorough assessment and IUP process with those families. That's that area.
Thank you. And then so whole child support. Socorro may have some thoughts here on whole child support.
Well, and certainly Carrie may augment to make sure we're getting K-12. I think we've heard from the community and the board the need to continue to invest in the well-being of students so that they can thrive academically. So we'll always be holding that up as a priority, and how we're resourced to do that and how that feels. As people implement, we'll be looking at the ways in which we get the right supports to the right schools and families and students. And so that's ongoing opportunity that we seek to expand and refine.
And we're looking at that in both the, socio-emotional wellness of students as well as the academic needs of students at the site. So it's an ongoing discussion.
And then student site support. We're looking at a new funding model for unduplicated students.
We certainly understand that the greatest impact we have as a district is at the school site level, and giving sites, principals, leaders the resources they need is of a great effort and concern to us. And so thinking about how we do that both creates a district standard for what every school should have, and also recognizes that different schools have different resources available, and how we meet all of those demands in the best way, again, so every site, every student thriving, prospering, staff feels comfortable and secure.
And then we've also heard about science camp and field trip.
We have, and that's a discussion around that, becoming really part of our core delivery of instruction and support for those different areas in science, as well as across the board with field trips for all students.
And then we just need to let you know too that facility capacity with all of the services we're adding, with UTK coming on board, we're starting to max out at our sites with site capacity. And so we're looking at that. We're going to bring some options to you with the facility master plan, but it's an issue, and we need to be careful about how we handle that. I think we wanted to go back here to this slide here.
Not a question, just I think it's important for you to share.
Oh.
We sped kind of past that you addressed, but this is the key takeaways that they then transition into. So how do we then appropriate or prioritize those discretionary funds?
So, the important thing here is, like, for us to understand, the one-time money is masking that we're really overextended. We're financially overextended, but we have some time to manage that. And we have a lot of categorical programs that are coming on board that we want to thoughtfully implement and put on, make them part of the whole entire systemic program that we're offering. So when you look at, art and music, ELOP, all of the partnerships and engagements that we're going to be doing, it's important that we do that well. So, and it's focused on your priorities, and that's what we're really trying to do, is focus everything we're doing on the priorities that you've set us.
And to the new trustees, all of your board commitments are being met. All the things that you've set up, you said you want us to do, the obligations, the triggers, those are all being met, which is the good news part of the story, with an eye towards the future saying, and we have to continue to do well, because at some point, those things Jeff just mentioned come into play significantly.
So, all right, so let's talk about, have a discussion about things that are important to you as a board. And it's open, we're all ears. We want to hear what you have to think about where you want to go.
I want to put this one up there.
We put some of these thoughts here in this diagram, kind of map them to your priorities. And so we're interested to hear what kinds of thoughts you have, where you want to put the importance. We can, I know we're out of time, so we can have a discussion, or we can even have, we can use some dollars if you'd like to do a little activity. Depending on we'll leave that up to you guys on how you want to do that. I want to be respectful of your time. So, but we do want to hear from you about what you think is important in all of this.
We like to do one at a time. Whatever's the fastest.
How long does that? We have some questions.
It would probably take longer than just having the board speak to some of their, how they prioritize.
Okay. Yeah.
It's just
Right. We'll start with our discussion and then later on do that too. We'll start with trustee Ursula.
Sure. Sorry, I have to get the doctor's appointment. So I'm excited about the science camps and the field trips because I know that's something we hear from parents all the time. So leveling that field a little bit for the schools that don't have foundations that can fund that freely is exciting to see. And shade structure, I know, is something that we've talked about for a long time. It's not only a public health asset so that the kids can play more freely for longer outdoors rather than having them come in early and lack their physical activity because it's too hot outside. But also shade structures were some ways that many other districts, when they had them in place, were able to weather the pandemic in an easier way. They were able to just move classroom time outside, and I know that we weren't able to do that in this district, largely because we don't have shade structure to let them do that. So there will be other pandemics and other reasons to want to be outside, so shade is super important for that. So thank you for all of this work. It's really great to see.
Murphy. Actually, I feel the same as Leah. Certainly science camp, field trips, something that parents bring up to us all the time. I do think that elementary counseling is incredibly important, given what we're dealing with in the district at the different grade levels. Honestly, it's really hard for me because this all is very important. Certainly bringing the chronically absent kids back, just for the future of all of us, and is very important. I do love shade structures. I know every parent friend that I have is really hot on shade structures, and so that is a big deal. That'll make a lot of people happy if we are able to do shade structures, for sure. And certainly the universal TK, I know how important that is for kids to get into school early so we can get that early grade reading up to par and get them started quickly, or get them going in the school environment as quickly as possible. And for special needs, another one of my priorities would always be the instructional aid hours and sort of assistance we can give at the school sites with that. So those would be, those are my main priorities, I guess. But I like all of them. So, so not to say that I don't like one of them in particular. I like all of them. So, Jeff, you just have to do better with your numbers.
work that.
And that's an important point of context for this conversation. There are a lot of important things on here. We're putting a little pressure on to say, of all those really important things, what are some of the things that rise to the top? So thank you for that comment.
But all the work on the priorities for our district is not without gratitude for all of you and everything you put into it, because it's obvious we're all trying to do the best for our kids. So thank you. I'm going to run with Leo too, because I'm supposed to be in 2 meetings right now. So, good to go. But thank you.
First of all, thank you, staff and superintendent, for listening to our board priorities and basically focusing on what we were asking and then working and basically doing the work. So we appreciate it, because it is tricky to try to juggle everything, because of course we want everything, but we can't have everything, because we also need to be fiscally responsible. And I do remember the board, when we received all tens of millions of dollars from the state and the federal government, ESSER funds as an example, you know, one of our priorities was, or one of our asks was, you know, please use this one-time money, but know that it needs to be sustainable if we are choosing something. And so when you mentioned the phrase one-time money on ongoing expenses, that's always something to be aware of and be a concern, especially when it comes to hiring, you know, personnel, because it is important. These are people's lives, and if you give them the promise of the end, you have to take it back. So thank you for always keeping an eye on that. So a couple of questions. One that has to do with the state grab of monies. How was that? How do we? Is that protected? Like, how do we protect that? Do we just? Is it something that's kind of a shell game? I mean, I don't understand how it works.
So it's specific to the art and music grant, the one-time money. We were scheduled to get about $11 million. The state now is projecting that they're going to only give us about half of that.
Right.
So
okay.
We're looking at bringing a plan to the board at some point that will hopefully we'll be able to spend half of that.
So that's an example.
It's still, we'll know by when the governor passes his budget in June.
Okay.
If he's gonna.
There are lots of ways, mechanisms, deficit funding, a COLA, not giving the full apportionment. They can even go after our collection of property taxes. So the state has all kinds of mechanisms if they want to deficit fund or reduce funding for a district. We are not immune to that, even in a community-funded district. I think it's the message. And so it's important for Jeff and our advocates on the board to stay tuned to what's going on in Sacramento. Stay ahead of it.
Thank you. So as far as the slide, in the first quadrant on the left, I would love to see meeting the needs of all students, those in the middle, those that need the help, but also those who want to soar. For example, we had 2 parents mention the GATE program and how we could, if we can make it more robust, provide perhaps more training for teachers, etc. So if we, I don't know, is this a working document? We could add that element in it so we can meet the needs of the exceptional students as well, since we did hear from the public today, and I do hear it from my constituents. The bottom quadrant to the right, we also had mentioned in the past the need for our NPRs to be updated or revamped, and I know that this is part of the Master's Facilities Plans audit, but given the fact that Prop 28 is going to give more money towards arts, and the fact that NPRs basically affect every single student in our district because it is almost the heart of a school. We have performances there. We have use it as lunch, congregational PTA meetings, etc. I would like to see the NPRs also get some upgrades. But I do understand the fact that it is also part of the master plan, so you don't want to spend too much money on something that's going to be potentially be done, but certainly a consideration to keep it on our radar. I love the fact, as everyone else mentioned, that we're going to offer the opportunity for all elementary students to go to science camp, go on field trips. That's part of the enrichment, and the kids need to be out of the bubble of just their classroom in order to learn. So thank you for that.
Great. Carol said an important topic, which I think we heard from a parent today, which would be those kids on the high achieving aspect. We want everyone to get to that level, but how can we even excel them even greater? So that would be one thing that we could look at, fund some interesting types of educational programs possibly that we could provide. We do hear a lot about instructional aid hours, so I'm glad that we're providing that. That's one of our priorities here. And then assessments. So we're spending a lot of this time trying to focus on getting our kids to that next level or bringing them up to grade level and beyond, and we're spending a lot of money on that, but is it actually working? So making sure that we're assessing that to see, hey, is what we're spending really helping our students? And so I like that we're assessing, and I like that we're assessing yearly so that we're not just throwing money at a problem that maybe needs some other tweaking. And elementary counseling, we hear that a lot. I love that we would have a counselor at every elementary school, because as we know, book smarts only get you one part in life. How you handle yourself and others is probably maybe even more important. So I really enjoy that we're spending money there. Chronic absenteeism, of course. One thing I didn't mention in the academic achievement, universal TK. I think it's so important, particularly bringing students back to our district. I think that is a big reason why there's going to be some students or parents that might not see our district or might think of maybe a private school or whatever, but we're offering an amazing full day TK. Be amazing, and get them stuck in our district. As I go to the facility master plans, I love that we're prioritizing safety, because there's nothing more important than making sure that our kids get home from school safe, that we send them there and they come home to us. So that's very important to me. And then shade structure, I've heard a lot from the community about shade structures. If I was looking at this, I love shade structures, would love to have some, would love to see, different types of shade structure and what we can afford in that. But, my bucket, those would be my two big things there in the facility master plan. And of course, meaningful communication. Fortunately, fortunately, that costs a little less, but it's a big impact, right? So making sure we're getting out our message, and I think we've done a really good job with that in prioritizing plans and part of our marketing and PR firms that we're using.
Just a point of clarification, because I'm trying to capture where people are. I think part of assessment was the assessment that Sarah was mentioning before, the assessment of students. So what I'm hearing you say is that's one item, the need to continue to assess our students. For example, preschool age students for special education, there's those types of assessments. But there's also this bucket of assessing of and for learning, and are the things we're doing working? And so if I understood you correctly, I want to add that to my sheet.
Yeah, that's a big one for me, because I don't want to keep throwing money on a program that's not working.
Yep.
Right.
We always say, is it working? How do you know?
Yeah.
Right?
Right. Exactly.
That's right, they're dancing, and we say it every day.
Right. I'm going to stop paying that gym membership. It's almost not working.
Let's not get dressed.
Okay.
I pretty much covered it all. Most important to me would probably be in the academic achievement. The universal transitional kindergarten is just amazing. I think early literacy and getting our kids in there and getting them reading early is going to be important for K through 12. Instructional aids, hitting every kid, hitting the kids that are low, hitting the kids that are high, putting some money into our GATE programs, into those pathways also. Elementary counseling is huge. Having an elementary counselor on every elementary school is just going to be
fantastic. That would definitely be one of my top priorities. There to help every kid again. I mean, even if they're helping with behavioral issues, that's helping our high achievers as well, because now the teacher can teach. So I think that is probably one of my top priorities. And facilities would be my third. Making sure that we have the classrooms where our kids can learn and thrive. I think all of these are really wonderful, and I do wish we could do them all, but I think facility, master plan, and safety are higher priorities because they are one-time, we have a lot of one-time money. These are kind of not one-time, but initial expenses. They're not ongoing necessarily at the same level, so to me that makes sense to spend what we have the bulk of to do that and get that going. The instructional 8 hours are, I think, really important if we're going to try and maintain that high level of academic achievement to help in the classroom. And then a couple things that are similar to GATE, but I think one thing I don't see on here is creative and high quality elementary instruction. I think a lot of people come to our district for high school, and I think a lot of them don't, maybe I see a lot of families who get to about 2nd grade and also again at 5th grade, and there's large groups of parents, at least that I know, who seem to leave at kind of those times. So if we can get that K through 6th experience kind of uniformly wonderful and creative, I think that helps us, because we've made a lot of huge improvements at our middle schools. I mean, it's kind of amazing just to see those kind of, I feel like those, from what I hear from parents, those seem to be really thriving overall. As they came out in some ways, I think, stronger, which is wonderful. And the high school is really great too. But what I'm seeing in like the second, people are like, okay, we're going to give Newport-Mesa a try, and they kindergarten is so great, 1st grade, and then they get to 2nd grade, they're like, no, we're out. And then again, like I said, in 5th grade. So some kind of creative way of, maybe we think of pathways in elementary. What does that look like? Maybe like some kind of arts. We still want to offer that general ed, but giving people a reason to be excited and see how unique and wonderful our district is. And then for our high schools, making sure that we focus on having science, STEM teachers. Those are hard to find, so maybe some kind of effort around those so that we can offer all the higher level classes that our students might ask for. We've done such a great job supporting the peer tutoring and the tutoring. I think that is really wonderful. I think to see that go away too, because that's really brought up a lot of students who are struggling, and but I think at that higher level we're kind of missing something.
Thank you for this and for listening, not only to us throughout the year as we have put forward a lot of ideas, but also to our principals and staff, because I know several of these are reflective of what they have contributed as well. I'm really excited that one of our board priorities is developing a maintenance and facilities master plan, and I think it's a little difficult for me to make priority decisions without having those budget numbers, because I think those could be quite high. Some of those could be one-time money items. I think it's tricky to know what specifically we're making decisions about without knowing that variable, because I think some of our other items are not as high dollar as maybe $7 million or something for universal TK, and what else we could possibly do with advocacy or what that could look like. But I agree that all of these are really important, and really particularly excited about the weighted student funding. And I think too, one of the things that I would love to see going down to the meaningfully connect and engage with constituents. I know that there are lots of, we have a high need and a greater need than we have in the past for translation and interpretation, and I think I would love to see some active kind of problem solving and creative collaboration around utilizing OCD and the services that they provide, some of our facilitators, and then really having some designated people who help with our IEPs. That translation piece shouldn't necessarily all fall on our facilitators. And so I think I would like to see, rather than expend money outward, I would like to see some of the people that we currently have maybe have greater hours or get funded differently around that, because I think they know our kids best. And then I also similarly feel the same way about the chronic absenteeism. I know in the past we had SARB, there were some of those pieces that were very punitive, and some of those I think were helpful, but I think after COVID, and particularly with their focus on elementary counselors who have PPS credentials, they have a lot of great ideas. I would love to hear, as we're hiring some of those, what their ideas around chronic absenteeism, rather than going out and again spending money when we may have the resources inside. But I really appreciate, and I'm glad that we are talking about partnerships and engagement. I think that's huge. I think that's an area that we've struggled in the past, and I think that's a huge opportunity going forward. We've had so many partners connect through COVID and want to serve our families. And then I would also add the MPRs. I think that is something that I hear over and over again at school sites. I hear it from families. If we're going to do community engagement and we're going to really invest in partnerships, we need a space to do that. And I don't think it necessarily means knocking buildings down, but some just need new floors, some just need painted. And so I don't think those need to be overhauls. But I'm really thankful too for the science camp and the field trip. I think any of these that create new pathways for things that may have been an opportunity gap concern, I am particularly appreciative of. But all of these, I think you've really heard us. We've really spent a lot of time, I think, making sure that the priorities are met and what those look like. So thank you for doing that so well.
Can I speak to the facility master plan? Because I think we want to keep this in front of us. There are those things, like you say, that we can do that aren't as big ticket item. I think when we find the result of this facility master plan, and after the board is prioritized within that plan we need to work on, that we may have to look beyond district funding for that and have conversations about, how important are these to our communities, these facilities? Because we've had facilities study sessions where we've talked about some opportunities we might have, not now, but just to keep that in front of us, that there's always a way to do this. Just may take a little additional work for us to get it done. But, thank you for that.
Okay, so, all right, well, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. The next steps include we're going to start working on the actual budget, and we'll see you in June. And you'll see some of this show up in the LCAP, those kinds of new forms, that kind of thing. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for your presentation.
Yep, that's awesome. Yeah,
Thank you. All right, we will close the adjournment.